So our first home defeat since September, 2-1, the final score against Hull. I feel there's a lot to get through this evening. Glenn, I'm going to start with you. Friday's win at West Brom had seen the team bounce back from a poor defeat. And last night, to me, felt like a huge step backwards.
Yeah, we were shockingly bad, basically. From an hour before the kickoff, when the team came out, I put in our group chat, "Oh my God, he's picked that midfield again," or worse to that effect. And it was just a disaster waiting to happen from that moment. And whereas we had a distinct game plan against West Brom to how we were going to deal with their strengths, I couldn't see what on earth the game plan was supposed to be to deal with Hull's strengths. Hull had decided to play with courage, that buzzword, and they pressed us all over the park in much the same way that Huddersfield did in the first half of that game. Their forwards didn't let our defenders settle on the ball, but mostly they swamped our midfield, which was largely absent. Basically what happened, Stuart Armstrong, who I praised for being, really responsible and getting really close to Smallbone, and the other midfielder, Shay Charles, against West Brom, he was absent. He was kind of playing as an auxiliary left winger, either by design or maybe he just didn't have the legs to play 2 games in 4 days. Will Smallbone was kind of trying his best but struggling, and Joe Rothwell, well, less said the better, really, just in case one of his relatives is watching. But it was just awful. He has no idea what to do when he receives the ball with his back to play. No idea at all. And it just became painfully obvious that he was getting really frustrated, and he ended up giving away the second goal just with a bad touch. Maybe he doesn't do enough scanning around to see where the opposition players are. I don't know, but it seems like Russell Martin does not know how to use him. And I think his presence has kind of confused our options in midfield. Back before he signed, we had sort of Downs and Charles as the 6s, Aribo and Smallbone as the 8s, and Alcaraz and Armstrong as the 10s. I don't really know where Rothwell fits into all that. So the midfield was basically the problem. We gave away the first goal because Adam Armstrong dozed off and Kyle Walker-Peters didn't cover himself in glory down our right-hand side. I think Bazunu pushed it out and they followed it in 1-0. No response from us whatsoever. And then the second goal came in from Rothwell's mistake, basically. And I've forgotten the fact that we, that same player should have put us ahead. We had a glorious chance at 1-0. We should have gone ahead, which may have changed the game. But half time, and I was already thinking that the game was done because Hull are a much better side than Huddersfield. And I know we got away with it against Huddersfield. 3 subs at half time, could have been 5. None of the midfield or the attackers could have complained if they'd got hauled off at all. As it was, the 3 that came on all made sort of like quite a big difference. David Brooks, Shay Adams, I thought he had a really good game, which is bizarre because in his last game he was absolutely atrocious. So maybe that sums him up. But the star of the second half, without a doubt, was Joe Aribo, who I thought was tremendous from the moment he got on the pitch. Just looks fit, looks very strong. A totally different player to what he was last year. I mean, he I don't know if he has or not. It's hard to tell. But it looks like he's lost a lot of weight. Just looks to be moving more freely. I thought he was excellent, and for me, he has to come back into the starting 11. It was unfortunate in a way because we forced Hull back a bit, but they were kind of playing within themselves a little bit second half with the 2-0 lead. 87 minutes when we got the goal, and it just, if we'd got it on 75, then maybe we'd have had a shout at getting something out of the game. But I think it would have been undeserved, and I think it proves what we all said after the Huddersfield game. You don't get away with it too often. Regardless of how good your bench is and how good some of your players are, if you start a game that badly and basically waste the first 45 minutes, then you're not going to win many. And that 45 minutes was absolutely rank. I mean, it was just awful. Our midfield didn't play, and if the midfield gets nullified in this system that we play, then there's no ball progression, and there's through to the strikers, and you end up hitting it long, and there's no defensive screen either. So it was just a disaster that first half, and that is ultimately why we lost.
The damage had been done, hadn't it? I think he said
Yeah.
afterwards. Steve, do you think the blame kind of lands with the manager for picking that wrong side when you saw that team use an hour before kickoff? Were you thinking the same as Glenn, looking at that and that midfield?
Yeah, I mean, it's always a concern, I think, especially given that we're coming up against a side who we know can play against our system. They demonstrated that in the game up at their place back in October when it was, and yeah, it's frustrating that kind of it seems as if everybody else can see the very obvious problem, and yet it's just one of those occasional blind spots that managers do get, and it's weird. It's a weird phenomenon, isn't it, that it happens kind of at all levels, that some managers just have a complete blind spot for either one area of the pitch or one individual player, and yeah, so we've gone into this game without one of our two sort of players who we would probably say are comfortable playing that number 6 role. And as a result, we've left the three of the guys in there to be completely overrun. Rothwell clearly isn't up to speed on the system yet. I mean, it was the old Colton Palmer first touch, wasn't it, for that second goal? It was further than a lot of people can kick it, I think. And yeah, it's just a lack of cohesion in that system. And if you've got someone who's showing that vulnerability, then you shouldn't. They shouldn't be starting in games against good opposition. Fine, play them on Saturday against Millwall, where they're fourth and bottom in absolutely rotten form, and we're expecting to have 99% of the possession and roll them over quite easily. But against a side who, as I say, we know can play, it was just a massive mistake, I think. And I mean, Shay Charles demonstrated that he was very good on Friday night. I didn't think he was terrible against Bristol City. It was just his passing was off. Positionally, he was absolutely fine, and it was the positioning that was the problem last night. That yeah, as Glen alluded to, Smallbone was kind of in the right place most of the time. He was occasionally a fraction slow, which gave the whole players just that little bit of belief that they could go and nick it. I mean, they didn't tend to nick it off of him, but it then pushed them kind of 3 or 4 yards further up the pitch, which just squeezed the space and caused us issues. Rothwell was, I mean, every pass that Rothwell made seemed to be made about 10 mile an hour harder than it needed to be. There was one where he basically ended up sending Bazunu back 10 yards towards the corner of the area and put us under pressure. There are a couple of sort of blind sideways ones which he played sort of between attackers to Bednarek, which I mean, they both came off, but very close to being intercepted. And those passes are the ones where, I mean, I know obviously Russell Martin speaks of courage and being brave in these situations and having the belief to play these passes, but you've also got to play them at the right times and with the right pace. And he just wasn't anywhere near. And as you say, Stu Armstrong was nowhere near the middle of the pitch for the vast majority of the time he was on. So yeah, that midfield battle was lost from the time that team sheet went in, unfortunately. And it meant that the three kind of attacking outlets were left completely isolated. I think I think Alfie mentioned in our sort of group chat that Sekumara only had one touch inside the Hull half. And it's like, well, he's just given no service. Nobody's within 30 yards of him. And there were times, I think that we had a couple of counter-attacks down the right in that first half when Walker Peters went on a run and got beyond one or two players. But then he had three whole defenders kind of closing in on him. And you looked around and there's nobody. Like, he can't. I mean, the best he could do is either try and win a throw-in or kind of just lump it cross field and hope that it lands at a Saints' feet. And it was just really disjointed. I mean, second half was obviously a lot better. Couldn't be any worse, really. But yeah, I mean, as he said, the damage was probably done against good opposition. You needed to kind of get one back, probably first 10, 15 minutes of that second half, and change the direction of things.
It was courage that was lacking last night, Alfie, apparently. Bristol City, it was all about bravery. Last night, it was about courage. To you, does that mean like the willingness to take the ball? And it just seemed times when the goalkeeper had the ball and there just weren't any options opening up in front of him. Is that what he means by courage? Just willing to take the ball and take somebody on?
I think when you're playing against a team like the setup, like the way Hull were, yes, I think that is what it means, because they're obviously doing a man-to-man press and you've got basically no options. We saw quite a few times the ball would come into the holding midfielder, usually Will Smallbone or something, and he would have nowhere either shoulder to play it to, so it would go straight back. And then Steve mentioned a couple of times where it went straight back, and then Gavin Bazuni's pushed 10 yards back, and everybody comes in, all congested into the Southampton half, and that's why Sekou Mara didn't touch the ball in the whole half, basically the entire game. Obviously came off half time. The only person who was really stood anywhere of use would have been Samadozi on the left, and he was the one who actually reluctantly didn't come in and join the sort of scramble in the middle. But you still couldn't get the ball to him, still couldn't make anything happen. What I saw in possession was just pure panic. I think Hull, I mean, look, fair enough. Hull City came, and that was an excellent away performance because they nullified what Southampton are good at, and that's playing it around quickly. They stopped that from happening. They turned the atmosphere because it became quite frustrating and quite panicked pretty quickly. And yeah, I just think that there's no options to pass to. You start giving the ball away, you start inviting pressure on, and obviously the two goals you conceded are pretty poor as well. So yeah, for me, just panic in possession, not knowing who's go to, not having the spare man they're so used to finding. And I think Russell Martin made the point and mentioned that Gavin Bazunu in the second half, his distribution was excellent because he actually had somebody to pass to. Made that point quite specifically. But yeah, the subs when they came on, they were good. Like the second half performance, in my opinion, was good. It just wasn't good enough to turn around a 2-goal lead. There's a reason why the coming from behind to beat Huddersfield when 2 goals down was the first time Saints had done that in about 4 years, because it doesn't happen often and you can't get away with it every single time. But yeah, David Brooks for me has to start on Saturday. I can understand why he didn't. I can understand why he sort of kept the same team. But for me, Adam Armstrong just looks a little bit tired at the moment. I don't know if it's just sort of so hard going in behind the channels every time, and he's also coming in short to try and make tackles, try and get the ball himself. But when David Brooks came on, he just seemed to pop up in so many different areas that Adam Armstrong wasn't. He was picking the ball up out on the left and playing it back inside the box. I think the goal came from something like that. The chances they did have came from that. So there's going to be a couple of changes on Saturday, I'm pretty sure. So we're going to see another different team lineup. And we can only hope that it's got Flynn Downs on it, because the obvious thing that is still missing is Flynn Downs. So yeah, let's see.
Yeah, you do kind of wonder, and you think somebody like Brooks might have a bit of a field day at the weekend. Couple of things I just want to go through. I've got a question from James, who's one of the patrons. I know we've touched on a few of these bits, but Glenn, I'm just going to read you the question. It says, can you ask the guys if they think teams have found us out? Huddersfield did it for 45 minutes. Bristol City did it for the full 90, as did Hull last night. We can't seem to cope with teams that press. And don't even get me started on that starting midfield trio. I know, I think we've covered off the midfield trio, but is it teams are doing their homework and working us out? And they've discovered the best way to play against us and how to, like last night, get the crowd on the edge and change the atmosphere in the stadium.
It's very difficult to play that way and press us for 90 minutes. I do think there are times in games like the first half yesterday where you kind of have to ride it out, and you kind of just have to be a little bit more pragmatic. I think we seem to struggle with that. We have one way of playing, and that's it. And it reminded me a little bit of the Leicester game at the start of the season, where we just got all panicky and gave away a couple of goals, I think it was, in that game. I don't think teams have necessarily sussed us out. I think it's always been the best way to play against us. I don't think it's rocket science to a team that wants to have possession, you press them high up the pitch. I don't think that's particularly a big revelation. If the other team plays well against you, you've got to rise to the challenges that presents. And against Huddersfield, we did it eventually, but against Hull, we just didn't. And it was almost like we were waiting for half time. Please sort this out. I mean, in my opinion, there should have been probably 2 substitutions made in between the first and the second goal. But I know not many managers are going to pull 1 or 2 players after half an hour. But it was so bad from probably after the Rothwell miss until half time. It was so bad, and it wasn't getting any better. So that annoyed me about yesterday, the way we kind of waited till half time to do anything about it. There didn't seem to be. Maybe there were some sort of like subtle positional changes that I missed, but it didn't work, whatever it was. So I just think, in answer to the original question, we just have to be better at dealing in game with periods of where the other teams are pressing us, and in the second half we sussed it out with everybody who remained on the pitch played slightly better, and the substitutes made a huge impact. But I mean, Russell Martin's not addressed the obvious issue with that midfield selection. I mean, 8 goals we've let in with those 3 as the midfield in, I think it's about 130 minutes. I mean, that just cannot go unnoticed. But I did remember saying that after the Bristol City game, and here we are again.
Same thing. There's a bit of deja vu about it, isn't there? A couple of other bits about the game. Alfie, should we have had a penalty? Did you see the replays? I couldn't see it from where I was.
Yeah,
when I was downstairs drinking a pint of whatever it was from the Dancing Man Brewery. I'm done with this. So was it a pen? Should we have?
I mean, it's a blatant handball. The only bit that's up for debate is it a push from Taylor Bellis, and I don't have the answer to that. He obviously makes contact, but for me, it's not a natural place to sort of fling your hand. So I'd have given a penalty, but I mean, Steve's looking like maybe he disagrees.
No one really complained, did they?
No.
Well, yeah. I mean, this is the problem. There weren't many complaints from any Saints players at the time. But I mean, like, having looked back on the highlights, they show basically 3 angles of it, and none of them quite catches whether there's any actual kind of push. All you can see is there's a hand on the defender's back. And unfortunately, referees being referees these days, they are lazy. They will just give easy decisions against attackers in those situations because the ref doesn't want to give a penalty for a player doing something utterly ridiculous, because you think, well, why has he done that? So he was always going to give the easy decision, which is defensive free kick. Unfortunately,
and we got away with one potentially at West Brom as well. So you can't
evens it up. So 13 games, I think it is, to go now. Steve, I was just going to ask, can we afford any more slip-ups? And everyone's been we're getting to that point in the season now where we're starting to look at the fixtures and who we've got coming up and going, well, maybe that one, maybe a point there.
I mean, I think you can afford slip-ups because, I mean, with all the best will in the world, Leeds and Ipswich aren't going to win all 13 of their remaining games either. So, yeah, you've just got to do your own job and get things sorted. There are going to be slip-ups. We're not going to be able to maintain 100% record from now until May. That's just not realistic, and I'd like to think that nobody actually thinks that we can do that. But yeah, one game at a time. But yeah, I mean, I think all eyes are realistically on that game at Leicester next month, aren't they? Win that game, and who knows? But yeah, we've got all 3 of them to play away.
Yeah, it's actually quite a tough run-in when you think about it as a 13, because they play 7 of the top half in that 13, and the record against those 7 isn't actually amazing. Obviously, because they've lost to all of Ipswich, Leicester, and top man, I can't quite think. They drew a couple against Coventry and stuff like that, Watford. So I think they've ended up, of those 15 games they played against the current top half, they've still got to face. I think they've won 4, drawn 5, and lost 6. They've got to play 7 of them in their last 13s. But at the end of the day, you've got to beat the best teams. Obviously, we know that going to the top 3 is going to be what ultimately decides the lay of the land this season, especially for that final day of the season.
I did today, I'll be honest, put the playoff final in my calendar, which I hadn't done until now. I just thought, but you know what? I just better check that that we're around for that. Do you still think we can make the automatics, Glenn? Because last night was
because
I'm starting to have my doubts now. That's all.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're going to have doubts after 2 defeats in 3, but it wasn't so long ago that Leeds lost 2 games in a row. Leicester lost 2 games in a row. Ipswich had 1 win in 8 or whatever it was. So the chances are, I mean, we're having our little blip, if you want to call it that now. Those teams are almost certainly, they're all going to have one between now and the end of the season. Hi, Leeds fans. Yeah, you will have a blip between now and the end of the season.
I thought Ipswich were going to have theirs last night.
But I couldn't believe that. That summed it up for me. To concede in the 94th minute and then go and score the winner after that is ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, I say this, and it's a bit of a cliche, but I honestly don't look too much at the results that the other teams are getting, because I just figure that if we do our job, then it will sort itself out. It'd be a handy bonus if Leeds or Ipswich kind of lost. I mean, all that yesterday's result sort of gave me is that I now obviously want Leicester to beat Leeds at the weekend, whereas I was kind of undecided about that beforehand. And after a couple of defeats, you kind of think, okay, so maybe reeling in Leicester is a bit unrealistic, and we've just got to aim for second place. But no, I certainly think it can still be turned around.
Could be back in second by Saturday afternoon, honestly.
Yeah, we've had one. We've had one massive run undefeated, and how many games is left? 13.
Yeah,
13 games.
If we win 10 out of the last 13, then there's no reason why we can't do that. But we have to.
Well, that'll be under points then, won't it?
Yeah, you have to get back. You have to get back. We have to get back on it, and we have to stop picking that midfield. Simple.
It just did make me laugh when he was talking about courage yesterday. We've had it was bravery, wasn't it? And courage. It's starting to sound like a script from The Wizard of Oz. I can just see if the next time we lose, it's going to be brains or hearts or something. But I just want to do player of the week as well. In the stadium, they announced Jan Bednarek, I think, as player of the match, which was interesting. Not long after Joe Aribo had scored. So obviously, I think Aribo is probably the name that most of us are going to agree on. It was slim pickings. Alfie, anybody? Have you done your ratings yet in the Echo?
Yeah, I've done my ratings. Yeah, Joe Aribo and David Brooks, I think, both got an 8 from me. So I mean, I'll say whichever one of those you're not saying. But they both changed the game when they came on. Both involved in the goal or scored it. And I said about David Brooks, but he popped up in so many different areas. He wasn't sort of limited to that right hand side. And in a game like that where you're really struggling to make things happen, that's exactly what you need. So yeah, David Brooks, if you're saying Joe Aribo.
Yeah, Steve. Anybody else? Not really.
Shay Adams, I thought was very good second half, and this is one of the frustrating things, and kind of where you do have a lot of sympathy with the manager in terms of team selections, is that Adams has had so many games this season where he's just looked completely anonymous, and it's like, well, why are you out there? Why are we picking him? And then he'll come on with a little bit of a point to prove, and he'll play like he did last night, where he was holding the ball up, he was strong in the challenge, and not willing to be bullied around by the centre backs, and little flicks around the corner, and bringing other people into play, and getting himself into the box, and that sort of thing. And then he'll get a start, and then he'll kind of amble around and not do very much. So it's really frustrating. You just want him to kind of be able to put that sort of performance, and I'm kind of loath to say effort, because I'm sure he is trying every time he plays, but the way it looks is that there's kind of a reduction in the effort and the sort of work rate in these games where he's kind of a little bit sort of isolated and things like that. Whereas like last night, he was excellent, and you just want to kind of bottle that up and sort of unleash it kind of at will, really, and you'd like him to be a little bit more consistent. But I guess we've learned over the last 4 years that consistency isn't something you're ever really going to get from him.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you agree, Glenn? We've got Joe Aribo, we put David Brooks, we put Che Adams on there.
Another substitute, Wee Man. Again,
Yeah.
just thought he could. I mean, I don't think Sam Edozie was that bad, but when Wee Man came on, he added a lot of energy, a lot of drive. They sort of like pushed him in field to number 8 for a little bit, and then put him back to the left wing. And when they brought Sulemana on, to flatter to deceive as usual. But I thought, I thought Ryan Fraser, and I know this will boil a lot of urine. I didn't think Ryan Manning was that bad either. He was up against Philogene, who everyone's been sort of raving about. Barely saw him. You know,
Yeah, that one in the first half where he got turned. But other than that,
yeah, I thought he did okay. But it's a bit like when people couldn't stand Russell Martin's style of football, and they were going to slag it off no matter what. I think Ryan Manning could score a hat trick and still get slagged off by certain people. But
I'm a pretty staunch defender of Ryan Manning, but I did give him a force. Maybe I need to check my own sort of.
Prejudice. No, I just thought he wasn't bad defensively, and in a game when most people struggled. I mean, I think sort of awarding 4s and 5s for everybody based on that first half. I don't think you can be blamed for that.
Yeah, fair. Okay, well, there's a social media vote to follow to settle that debate.